Let's start with a little story about my gacha game experience. So I actually started my channel because of Genshin Impact. I loved that game so much. I really enjoyed building my characters, building my team, and breaking the game. Now, after a while, you start to get bored of being a whale, and I didn't even spend too much money. Like, I was definitely spending money, but I spent a lot of time on my characters and just trying to make the best team possible, and there just started to be nothing to do in the end of Genshin Impact. They didn't add any significant bosses, they didn't add any end game to really challenge the player, and even people who were free to play but had amazing teams were kind of left to just look around, take pictures, and edit your teapot once they added in the housing system. Eventually, I realized this game was just not for me, and specifically with gacha games, they want you logging in every day. There's really no end game or end point or credits or anything like that. So I was like, wow, I guess this just isn't for me. Many gacha games have come out recently that actually have pretty good gameplay, but just couldn't grab me because I don't want to play another gacha game. I don't want to log in, I don't want to grind out a really good team and then get to the end game and there's just absolutely nothing to do with no challenge. Wuthering Waves was a game that came out recently that I actually gave a good shot. They really emphasized their combat system and they wanted to make a game like Genshin Impact, but getting rid of all the issues that Genshin had. Now, while I could definitely commend Koro Games for the combat system, the bosses, and just overall taking Genshin's issues and kind of ironing them out, the game was a little too much like Genshin. Like, I felt like I was doing the exact same thing, almost booting up the sequel to Genshin Impact, and eventually it just got old. I didn't like grinding the resin to get artifacts and fighting the same bosses over and over and over. When you grind to these bosses for 30 times in a row every week, they get old, you know? They're not intimidating anymore, they don't bring the wow factor, so it started to become the same thing even if the combat system was more in depth. So I was like, I guess it's still not for me. Then comes Zenless Zone Zero. My god, Mihoyo, they are talented developers. They have a lot of money and they definitely have some talented devs on their team. There's a lot to Zenless Zone Zero that I think is fantastic, and I wish this was just a normal console game disc that I could put into my system. The writing for the characters here is actually pretty stellar. One problem I had with Genshin, Wuthering Waves, and pretty much almost every gacha is the stoic, boring dialogue and just terrible VA. I don't know what it is, but the voice acting is usually terrible for these games, and I'm so bored usually skipping through the dialogue. Here with Zenless Zone Zero, I no joke almost love every single one of the characters. They are brimming with personality and the voice actors did a fantastic job. And when you go into actual cutscenes in this game, by the way, there's a whole bunch of them, the animation is actually spectacular. You get to almost see that they wanted to show off, like the amount of facial animations and expressions these characters do. It's almost overboard at times, like the developers are showing off. And then we got my man Billy over here. This character just cracks me up. I love every single voice line he does in combat. He just deserves to be in a better game. And it might sound like I'm crapping on gachas, and I pretty much am, just because the way the gacha system works, you have to keep players coming back every day, and people could spend a lot of money and basically break the bosses that they put in. It also is a mobile game, so they have to make it not too challenging, you know, because you have touch controls for some of your players. So a lot of these things kind of go in one circle that make me not really like gacha games. If you're a fan of them, that's totally cool, do you. I was obsessed with Genshin Impact, so I can't be talking shit about them too much, but this game has a lot of love and effort put into it, and let's get into the combat system, which is the main reason why I've been so into this game. Now, an issue I had with Genshin Impact was it was extremely easy. Now, here in Zenless Zone Zero, it's not much harder, although when you get to the end, there's definitely some bosses that have way more in-depth mechanics than any Genshin boss. It's still not the hardest game in the world, but what Zenless does absolutely perfect, no, better than perfect, is style. It's almost like they ripped the style Atlus has been putting into their Persona games into an action combat system. The thing here is, even though it's easy, every time you go into a combat encounter, it's going to be stylish and you're able to kind of experiment around and be very creative. A lot of these characters' kits also have more than meets the eye. Some people are like, oh, you just click 2 buttons. You may think that, but the way you could hold down the buttons to do different combos, or the way you mix and match your heavy and light attacks into your supers, there's a lot you can actually do here. And at the end of the day, when the screen goes wipe out and your character is just doing an insanely badass still frame, it's fun every time. I like to make the joke this is like a crack combat system just ingrained. Like, did they put drugs into this combat system? It's sending dopamine to your brain like every time. Every time you do an assist and your teammate comes flying in, it is just so much fun. That's another thing is, you know, a lot of action games these days, they have to kind of copy the same mechanics, right? How many parrying systems have we had in the last 3 years? Zenless does the same thing, right? You have a parrying system, but they switch it up a little bit, which I actually really enjoy. You basically swap in your teammates to parry, and when they do, it is just sick. They'll fly in and totally guard the attack, and then do their own counter attack, and then usually you could send in another teammate to do another chain attack, and you just keep having your teammates go in and out, and it's just, again, very intense, and your adrenaline is kind of going the entirety of the time. Now, you still have to grind for equipment, artifacts, weapons, and all the same kind of BS you had in Genshin Impact or Wuthering Waves and all these games, but with here it's a little bit more streamlined. You're kind of just running around your persona-like hub and talking to NPCs, and everything's kind of right around you and you can teleport all to it. There's no open world. You got to go search a bunch of chests and do a bunch of puzzles. So this game is honestly really relaxing to just hop on, do a bunch of crackhead battles, and then just enjoy the scenery, because like a lot of the NPCs have a lot of detail. You can tell they spent a lot of time making the world feel alive because it's not very big, and overall I'm just enjoying this game a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of having to log in all the time to kind of keep up, and in general I'm not doing that. I'm just playing at my own pace whenever I want. But the thing about this game is it definitely got me to come back and enjoy it. And overall, I think this combat system needs to be commended. A combat system does not need to be super challenging as long as it is extremely fun the entire time and has variation. And in my opinion, this combat totally excels at that. Like, you're talking to the #1 dude who wants a challenge in his games. But here with Zenless, like, there's a challenge sometimes, but the majority of the time, you're just styling on these guys, and it is fun every single time. So yeah, that was my story of getting back into a gacha game, and I wish this wasn't a gacha game. So who knows if I'll stick with it. It might not be able to keep my attention the entire time, but in general, guys, this combat system is fun. If you're able to hop on this game and not spend any money, I definitely would advise you to check it out if you're a combat connoisseur like myself. But yeah, very fun game. Love the art style, love the characters, love the combat. So that was my review and story of Zenless Zone Zero. Let me know if you guys have tried it out yourself, if you're playing it right now. And overall, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Peace.